All right, today we have another episode from the archives with one of my incredible guests. Enjoy. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who have experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. All right, folks, welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. I'm a psychologist, and I am so excited to get this thing going today. Really excited about our guest, Linda Curran. Linda is a board-certified licensed professional counselor, trauma specialist, and veteran clinician. Linda's trained thousands of mental health clinicians on trauma treatment all over the country and is president of the Integrative Trauma LLC in Havertown, Pennsylvania. Place I actually used to live in a while ago. But Linda, told our audience just a little bit about yourself, and why don't you share some personal information and so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Well, let's see. I just got a new dog. I'm very excited about that. Her name's Margaret. I named her after one of the nuns in school because she looks like she's wearing a habit. You said I'm an author and a trauma specialist. The thing that I actually am most proud of is the website that I put together. And I didn't let you get to that part, but the website that I put together is very similar to what you're doing. It really is bringing together a whole bunch of resources for people who are doing this work. You and I both know this work is as fulfilling as it is draining at times. So there's resources for both clients and clinicians on there. And I would really like people to go there. It's www.trauma101.com. You don't have to buy anything. There's just tons of resources for people. And that's really one thing I want people to know. I got into, and I know you're going to ask me why I got into this field, but I'm going to tell you, I didn't choose this field really. I backed into the field. I tried like hell not to be in this field because it meant that I had to go to therapy. So when I went to therapy, because I was in grad school, then I discovered that, trauma wasn't just about Holocaust or veterans. Trauma was a really big thing. And it was in my life, like all over the place in my life. But the really sad part is most people have what I have. So there's not, there's probably, that I would say the lucky percentage of people who have had secure attachments and really have had, kind of life where they build resiliency rather than been overwhelmed. But when I started looking at trauma and worked in community mental health, it was like, the problem is early childhood trauma, adverse childhood experiences in childhood is what everybody has in common that needs to be in therapy or it seems to end up in community mental health.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive into the website, which is phenomenal. I been looking over that for the past couple of weeks. So to get off, on the right foot here, we start off with a quote, a quote or a mantra that's inspired you throughout your life. It could be something that's, impacted you professionally or personally. What do you have?
Well, I have two of them. The one I have, I actually put it in the book, 101 Trauma-Informed Interventions, because I don't know who wrote it, and I would like somebody to step up and say they wrote it. It was probably the most touching thing I ever read. I read it in somebody's office, and it was anonymous. Nobody had taken credit for the quote, but here it is. It's long. They are survivors. If you don't have respect for their strength, you can't be of any help. It's a privilege that they let you in. It makes me cry, by the way, so maybe I should let you read it.
No, go ahead.
Okay. It's a privilege that they let you in. There's no reason they should trust you. None. You can't know their terror. It's your worst nightmare come true, a nightmare from which you can never awaken. It's unrelenting. There has been no safety, no one, no time, nothing. All was tainted. Hope was obliterated time and time again. That they are in our office is in itself a supreme act of valor. Okay, I've regained composure.
Wow. Okay, and you had another one?
Well, the other one is more about my own narcissism. So the other one is, for me, it was very, very touching. It's a William Blake quote that I finally got it when I was doing my own personal therapy. And we are put on earth a little space that we may learn to bear the beams of love.
Okay. Thank you so much. So obviously that first one, let's take that first one if you don't mind. I mean, that is so profound and so incredibly touching. I mean, you're talking about privilege and you're talking about valor. Let's break that down a little. Where has that come in your life? How has that impacted you individually, personally?
I think that I went to Gestalt training, which was a 3-year program after grad school. And I went there not for professional reasons. I went there because I knew a few people that were Gestalt therapists. And I thought that they got something that I didn't get. So when I was in Gestalt training, what I learned was, in order to be a good professional, I had to be a better person. And sitting with clients, I get that same feeling. It's like the reason that I do so much training, or the reason that it's important for me to do my own personal work, is because the people sitting in front of me, they deserve that. They don't deserve me to stay in, in my narcissism, or me to stay in my pathology, because it's easier for me to project the anxiety and let them carry it. Any of the things that would be boundary issues or any of those things, rather than let the client hold it, be very clear on what's mine, what's relational, and what's the client's. So I think that basically it's a responsibility to the client. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It's interesting, when I started this podcast out, I was not going to ask individuals about their trauma experience. And in a sense, it's almost inescapable. I mean, what you shared, with your first quote, I think is so personal and it's so moving. And now to hear you talking about how you bring that into the therapy office is really clearly speaks to how challenging and demanding, but what a privilege this work is. So I really want to thank you for that.
No, absolutely a privilege.
So this kind of, you started talking about the therapy office now, and it kind of leads us right into the next question, which is, and you said you kind of backed into this field of trauma, but let's kind of move back a little and just talk about psychology in general. Trauma therapy is challenging. Our listeners are aware of that. You've addressed that, but this focus here is on your journey as a trauma therapist, your struggles, your influences. Share with us how you got into the broad field of psychology in general, and then we're going to segue into trauma.
Well, I don't know. I think every girl that I grew up with, we all thought we wanted to be psychologists, because wouldn't it be cool to just sit and talk for a living? That was like one of those things that it was like, yeah, that's an ideal career for teenage girls. Like my daughter is 18 and that's what she's going to do too. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's the way that we idealize the profession, as saying, oh, like this is, it's just going to be so great. But I actually went for psychology. Like when I say I backed into it, I didn't make a decision. I took 2 masters at the same time. So I was thinking public health, like for outcome measures and stuff like that. I worked in a hospital for 20 years. Oh. And then I thought, well, all right, I'm not committing to either one of these things. And I think that's all part, I don't want to keep saying the word pathology, but I think it's all part of, okay, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I don't want to commit to anything because what does it say about me? But when I really decided to go, full into it. I thought, oh, cognitive behavioral therapy, this is it. Like, I can wrap my head around this. These are, automatic. I get automatic thoughts. I get how to do all these procedures. And the funny part is, as soon as I started working with clients, they were not nearly as impressed as my classmates at how good I was at this, because everybody that I saw, the cognitive behavioral therapy, it's limited in its usefulness with traumatized people. I'm not saying it's not good. It's fabulous, right? And it's a good starting point. But it really is a starting point. And so, I thought, oh, I could do this. This is really not too bad. And like I said, then I met some Gestalt therapists that had something that I didn't have. And what they had was access to their body and their emotions. And that was, oh, what the hell is this? So it's like I watched the director of the Gestalt Institute do some work with a traumatized woman, and literally, I'm not this woo-woo kind of person, but I saw the energy change, and I saw the woman transform in front of me. Like I saw the energy come from her body. And I really mean that, move out. Like she did, like Mary Lou Shack is the woman. She got up and she did this demonstration where, you push against hands. And it really is, it's about getting in touch with, stability in your core and stuff like that. But the woman just started shaking and shaking, kind of brings it like Peter Levine's work, but kind of started shaking, and you could see the release of energy, and her whole body changed and her whole face softened. And I thought, these people know something I don't know, right? And it was terrifying, right? But I thought, that's what I want. And so going into Gestalt Therapy Institute, I was very, very blessed because, the three directors were the most fabulous teachers I ever had, and I had a really good class. Mostly I was at my growth edge the whole time, but there were some other people that were working, and I really got to do a lot of work vicariously through them. And one of the lessons that for me that I didn't have to get directly was people who have a need to feel special have never been seen. And it was so touching to me because that really is, when you think of people with the attachment systems of, being avoidant or dismissive of relationships. Some people call it the narcissistic wound, but that's what it is. It's that, never have been seen, so have to feel special. So I saw all that work being done, and, I did my work. I'm still, I still do my work, but it was really, I was really very blessed to have, like a great group of people around me that were, at their growth edge as well.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing experience. And I'll have the link up for that in the show notes. And people can get to those show notes by going to westcoasttraumaproject.com and just hitting on the podcast tab. And Linda, your interview will pop right up, and we'll have a whole list of show notes there. I'll include that link for Gestalt. And Mary Lou Shack was her name?
Yeah, Mary Lou Shack, Philip Lichtenberg, and David Henrich. They were the directors at the time. Just, I can't say enough good things about them because I wouldn't be in the field without them.
Okay. So there were kind of sprinklings of interest of trauma in that discussion you just had there. So talk to us now about how you moved into specialization.
It's the same story because Mary Lou Shack, she's a Gestalt therapist. She's a trainer, but she's also a trauma specialist.
Okay.
So Mary Lou Shack became a supervisor of mine for some time. And basically, I like a sponge, like I got everything that I could take from her, and she's as generous as can be. So that was really where, I went to her and I said, Mary Lou, this is what I'm doing. And she said, well, then the Gestalt training is absolutely, essential for this. She said, but you want to probably go get trained in EMDR. So I went to get trained in EMDR. I went for level 1 training, and I came back. And like I said, my internship was at a community mental health. So when I came back, what I did was re-traumatize, I would say about 2 handfuls of people, not irrevocably. All right. So, I was able to do the repair work, but the problem was, and I know it's going to be one of the big errors that everybody make, it's too much too soon for trauma clients. But for me, it was one of those things where it was, you're kind of in a catch-22 because I come back from level 1 training and I have to do 50 EMDR sessions on single incident trauma with 25 clients. And it's hilarious, right? And every time I do a training, I say the same thing. So I'm sure people are sick to death of hearing it. But it's, where are you going to find single incident trauma within a community mental health setting? It's hilarious. So I did EMDR for processing trauma on people who were nowhere near ready to process trauma, because I thought that's what I had to do. Went back to Mary Lou and said, okay, I'm really, I'm doing some damage here. So we did a lot of repair work, and I started reading a lot about, Laurel Parnell's work and people who were, Debbie Corn, people were doing a lot of the resourcing first. So all of that, Belarus, Naprostek, guided imagery, anything that would be stabilizing. So we did learned a lot of the stabilization stuff in community mental health because it was just absolutely essential to do so. But that probably is where I got the interest in trauma, just from Mary Lou and from being in community mental health. Like I said, what they had in common was early childhood trauma. So it was like, well, this is, not only interesting, I imagine I have to know something about this. Mm-hmm. So all of the big names of trauma, I, read their books and saw their stuff. And the big deal that I saw was it really wasn't pulled together very well because there's so much brilliance out there in the field, and people follow one or two people and that's it. And, my hope is that we get a lot of these resources together so we don't have to reinvent, we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you want to learn something.
Right. Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that kind of early error. That definitely was the next topic we were going to talk about. What would you say, and I think maybe you kind of touched upon it though, but what did you learn from that? Basically that the importance of resourcing and stabilization. What would you say was your major takeaway from that early error, clinical error?
Guy, I did a series called Trauma Treatment with eight of the bigger names in trauma, and everybody had the same answer, which was too much too soon. If there were other answers, they were probably, for me, it was around boundaries, right? Boundaries would be one of the big, I guess, clinical, I want to say clinical mistakes, but you were going to have Janina Fisher on, and Janina Fisher said something that I thought was just, everybody should hear it, is she said, I'm a clinical instructor and I am a supervisor, and I would much rather have a clinician with a warm heart that needs work on boundaries than have somebody with a cold heart and good boundaries, because it's so much, it's so much easier to develop good boundaries than it is to open your heart.
Right. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, Janina is coming on. I'm in a consultation group with her, and she is just phenomenal, obviously. But thanks for sharing that. So this kind of brings us to really one of my favorite questions, if not my favorite questions. And, we talked about the challenges of this specialization, but to me, it's really important that we know what our why is, and I think it can be different. The reasons why we get into this field, as opposed to why we keep doing this, what drives us in this very challenging profession on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to put that to you. What keeps you going? What's your why for doing this on a day-to-day basis, Linda?
Because it is the most fascinating field in the world. That's it. You don't have to imagine it because you do it, right. But really it's a miracle-laden career. It really is the only way to describe it. I mean, to see the resiliency in the human spirit, unmitigated courage, relentless hope, just watching people heal, mm-hmm. Like having their lives transformed, not just people's lives, generations and generations of lives being transformed because people choose to do their work. They understand that they have a responsibility to other people. They come in, it's just, what else would you want to do?
Could you share a specific incident, obviously without mentioning names, but something that really drove that home for you, drove that realization that this is the most amazing field in the world where, resiliency, courage, and generations are being impacted and affected and in a positive way?
I've seen many, many clients, and I've seen people with burdens of trauma unbelievable to me, just like, how much pain, how much suffering that they had done in their life, and how much abuse and how much neglect, and just a horror show that was their life. And these are people who are good parents, who are positive members of the community. They become sports coaches, teachers, and they do really, really well. It's kind of inexplicable. How do you explain it? And that's what I mean. It's just about courage. Mm-hmm. It's about people saying, okay, they're like, when I say unrelenting hope, I mean, I have unrelenting hope, but and it isn't, they say hope's a four-letter word. It isn't, because, as long as we're alive, we can change. I mean, the part that's fascinating isn't, I don't want to say it so it sounds harsh, but it isn't just working with people, but it's understanding the brain science behind it of why it's possible. that people's brains are being rewired. Their bodies are being affected by the therapy that we do, by the therapy that they do. We facilitate the healing, but I mean, all the work is, I don't want to say that, like all the work is done just by that person and I'm just sitting there. But I mean, the hard work is being vulnerable. And that is not my position as a clinician. I mean, I'm never more vulnerable than the client because of the chair, So it's like, that is just, to me, it's for somebody to say, you hurt my feelings, not in our field, but in our world, like that's unheard of. You hurt my feelings. No, you wouldn't want to be seen as vulnerable. And these people come in and lay bare their soul. But there's no words for that. It's just that's a miracle.
That is. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it really speaks to this profession and really speaks to the work you're doing too. One of the things that I want to do here is really tease out the journeys of the people I'm talking to, like yourself. And you've just shared some amazing things so far. What is that special quality, that unique quality that you feel you have that allows you to do this work on the level that you do it? Is it that vulnerability you were talking about?
Well, I can absolutely identify with a client's vulnerability. I can absolutely identify. I'm not just a therapist. I'm a client, and we all are, right? I mean, if you're a clinician and you've never been a client, you're a terrible clinician. Just hear that. That's out there. I said it. I meant it. And I always tell people that, if you're a therapist that doesn't have issues, you're the most dangerous person in the room, right? So it's like to be able to recognize what my characterological flaws are, right? Or, and accept that they're mine, like that. I guess that's part of what I can do. But I don't know that it's anything special. I don't know that I have any special quality. I think what I do have is I understand what a privilege it is to sit in the seat.
Okay.
And I think that's probably it. I mean, I do think that's teachable. I think that's teachable. It has to be teachable because it's like, how do you not know that? Right. How do you not realize what that chair comes with? It's like there's a power differential built into the chair, and our job as clinicians is to level that as much as possible. But it's never going to be level because of the essence of the work. The essence of the work is the client is more vulnerable, and they are doing the hard things.
All right. I don't know if you follow me on Instagram or not, but when I do interviews, I usually do 2 interviews a week. I conduct 2 interviews a week. And usually I get so excited. I get so pumped up after these interviews because I get to talk to incredible people. And what I usually do is I go on Instagram and I talk about it. I want to share that excitement. Usually there's about a 2-month turnaround on my podcast, which means that they don't go live for a couple of months. And I have a problem with that because I want to share it. I get so excited about these things. So what I've done is I've created a membership called Trauma Therapist Plus, and it allows people for $5 a month to access these episodes about 2 months before they get published to the public. And you can also listen ad-free, which is really cool. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in listening to episodes before they get released to the general public and also listening ad-free, check it out. You can access it by going to Apple Podcasts and just clicking on any of the episodes that has a plus, Plus, before it. It's exciting. I'm excited about it. And you'll also help support the podcast. Thank you so much for being a listener. I really appreciate it. Take care. Do you think that privilege that comes with the chair, that comes with the work in a sense, obviously it's similar in, quote unquote, regular therapy. Is there a difference in trauma therapy, do you think, when you're working with someone who's been traumatized? Is there a different understanding that has to be had by the clinician? Is there a different...
There's something about knowledge base for this. So, I mean, to be able, like, people call it intuition, but I don't think it's intuition as much as it is you know what you're looking for in people's body posture, in their face, in the micro movements of their face. You understand what they're connected to. I mean, I'm talking about this, anatomically and physiologically, all of that. You understand what's happening. That becomes intuitive. I mean, we also, like people say, like, oh, I've always been good at this, or I've had, I have a sense about me. People open up to me, those kind of things. I understand that, but there's also a honing of these skills that people go, oh, you're a natural at it. And it isn't. People, I mean, you may be naturally inclined to be good at it, but you have to develop those skills. And those skills are, like I said, they're teachable. If you're asking what it is in me that makes it easy to identify with clients, it's not just being a client. I mean, I have no doubt that most of your listeners, are in this field. If they're clinicians, they're in the field to heal themselves or to heal the family. At least that's why they got into it. So, I mean, I make no secret of the fact that, I'm an alcoholic. I grew up in an alcoholic household. There's trauma all around me, trauma and chaos all around me. And that is, I mean, I think that's part and parcel to being able to identify with somebody, but that really, that doesn't give me, it doesn't give me any, like, I don't really understand somebody's unique and individual experience because I've had something similar. Right. I can identify, I know what pain is, but I think there's more to it than just saying, like, oh, I've always been good at this. It's okay. I'm good at, I may be good at this, but there are a lot of things I need to know to make me better at this because I owe it to the client to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, this, working with clients in the setting of trauma can be so draining, as you said at the top. And I think to a certain degree, self-care in our profession is a word that is very amorphous. I think it's kind of the elephant in the room too. But what do you do to care for yourself as you do this work? Do you do anything?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I wouldn't be in this field if I didn't, right? I mean, I'd be washed out long ago. I have to say that part of what makes me a good clinician is, I'll give you an analogy. When I worked in community mental health, I had a lunchbox. It was really big, and I usually had like 3 cheese sandwiches in it, some fruit and some vegetables and some candy and whatever. And there was nothing that was bad for anybody, but I always opened it up and there was always plenty for me and plenty for anybody else. Right. And that really is, I am so well resourced. I pride myself on how well resourced I am. And I mean that in all those ways. I make sure that happens. When there's things about self-care. When I was in community mental health, listening to stories, I think in probably one day, I heard 3 of the most violent rape stories that I had ever heard. And I remember being overwhelmed for days. Like I only work 3 days a week. So I remember that whole weekend being just completely, couldn't understand why I was like so, not just drained, but I was kind of paralyzed. And what it was I really, my empathy, people talk about the empathy dial, that Rothschild talks about up and down, but my empathy dial I was really seeing things as first person shooter, if you know what I mean, when I was hearing the stories, it was coming in as first person. Part of the skill of being a therapist is not being detached, but being able to dial back that empathy and really put ourselves in a third person, so we're not traumatized or re-traumatized, because that's not really so helpful for a client. I liken it to, when I was in the emergency room, it wasn't really helpful for me to be crying with the family members when my job was to intubate somebody and do CPR. My job was I had to be able to be okay to do what I needed to do. And I think to be able to do what you need to do in this field, for me, what I do, I need to have support around me all the time. I need to be able to talk to somebody about clinical stuff. Been in therapy, more often than not in my adult life. just, at different times for different things. I meditate daily. I do a lot of imagery work. I have like the alpha stim, walk every day with my sister. And I think walking is probably one of the best things that you can do. I mean, talk about alternating bilateral stim and aerobic exercise and getting air and, just getting away from what you need to get away from. All of those things I do, take yoga, and it's like, it may even sound a bit self-indulgent, but it isn't. All of those things are like what I put in the lunchbox when I went to community mental health. I have them here. When I need them, they're there. And if anybody else needs them, they can use them.
Wow. I'm pretty impressed. That's a lot. And that is awesome. I'm just so excited to hear that. So one of the things that kind of popped out to me that you said was the way you've learned to do the therapy in and of itself is a kind of resourcing for yourself, right? So this not adapting or adopting the first person shooter point of view, but rather a third person, that in and of itself is a self-care tool.
Yeah, it's distancing without not, it's nothing about saying I am not going to be empathic. It's more about
Got it. Yeah.
I need to be resourced enough. I don't need to be traumatized to understand this person's trauma. Right. Like I have enough to refer back to that I don't have to, be in the story. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that I'm not listening to the story. Don't hear that. It's that I'm hearing the story as this is this person's perception of their life events, and this is the way they took in the information, and this is how it's affected them. Yeah. That came through definitely. So I think we definitely got that. So that brings us to what's going on now. And I know you talked about the website, and I kind of want to spend some time talk about that because that is phenomenal. And that can be reached at trauma101.com, integrative trauma treatment. And before we start, Linda, I just want to say that I'm from the East Coast. We were talking about this before we started this a little, and originally from New York, but I studied Taekwondo in Havertown, PA. Says a long time ago. So that used to be kind of my quote unquote stomping ground. Not really, but I love the accent. Yeah, definitely neighbor. And another kind of coincidence, about 6 months ago, I was looking for a book. I was looking for a trauma book, and I went on Amazon and I actually got your book, Trauma Competency, A Clinician's Guide. And it's phenomenal. I mean, it really is. And I'm going to let you talk about the website and then we can get into the books, but share with us what you're really excited about. What's going on for you now that has really got you going? Well, how about I tell you what I should be doing and I'm struggling to do? I have a contract with Norton to write a book called Clinician Playbook Client Workbook, which is, about obviously it's about trauma, but it's a kind of working with all the different varieties. And when I say varieties, I mean the burden of trauma. So whether it be post-traumatic stress, whether it be post-traumatic stress disorder, single incident, or complex PTSD or DESNOS, or, any of the personality disorders, which I really just think of as trauma early and often, like treatment, I would say treatment algorithm, like protocols for them. And I don't mean like, here's a cake book of how you do it. I would never think that is doable, but kind of give people an idea of how to assess clients, when you assess them, what the information means, how to interpret the information, and then how to go about a treatment plan for each of those. Right. And I'm very excited about it because it'll be a shared resource for both client and clinician. And we don't have that. I don't see that in, like, when I was asked to write the book, I said to them, Andrea, I don't see a gap in the literature when I'm looking at, I look at your authors. I don't see a gap in the literature. And then when I thought about it, I thought, what is missing? There is no resource where you go, okay, here I have that, here is a playbook for you, the client, you do the work in here. I have all the theory here, and I have, the assessments and why we're doing it. And I have, I have what I need and you have what you need, but they're the same, right? So like we're sharing the same resource. So that's what I'm excited about that. It's due in January, so I imagine it'll be out sometime after that. I'm also very excited about something that I haven't started yet, but I just put the feelers out for. Trauma and addiction are about 90% correlated, and if people don't know that, the numbers say 80 to 90%. I've yet to see it lower than that, but there's a lot of people out right now that, again, like when we talk about trauma, addiction is kind of just seen as a symptom, whether it be substance or a behavior. It is kind of seen as a symptom of adverse childhood experiences and inability to self-soothe, inability to regulate emotions, those kind of things. So I want to do my next project on trauma and addiction. And who I think I would like to have is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Gabor Mate.
Oh, yeah.
I love him.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Yeah, in the realm of Hungry Ghosts. And he's Canadian, so he's nice, but you can't hold that against him, right? And I think that we had some woman named Vicki Reynolds come down and talk to us when we had an agency at one point, and they worked together up there in Vancouver. He's a psychiatrist, so I'd like him. And there's a woman here in your old stomping grounds at the University of Pennsylvania named Anna Childress. And then I'd like Claudia Black and Daniel Amen. And I think we're going to get together. I'll have commentary from Dr. Vander Kolk and hopefully Peter Levine and Stephen Porges as well. But I really would like to see that done and done well and bring together the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. Would love to see, if either Anda or Folletti. I have a clinical crush on both Dr. Folletti and on Dr. Porges, but only one of them knows about it. So that's what I'm excited about. The website, like I said, the website's been up for a while, and I'm very happy to see just how many people are using it. Like I said, it doesn't cost anything. You just have to sign in, and there's just tons of resources. But the resource section for clients, I think it's really helpful for people who are looking for a clinician or looking to start some sort of therapy with people who are informed, at least, informed, if not sensitive to trauma, if not specialize in it.
Yeah, the resource section in and of itself is just jam-packed. That really struck me when I was going through this. Something that also struck me in hearing about your latest project, there seems to be this sense of joining that you're trying to bring this collaboration between the client and the clinician in these projects you're putting together. Would you say that's accurate? Especially with this, the last book you're talking about, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think it is ridiculous to have a client believe that we're doing something to them or that we know more than they do about them. I mean, that isn't, like when I say hilarious, I truly mean that. I mean, how on earth could we purport to know more than they know about themselves? Yeah. We know some things and they know more. So I think that how we present ourselves as we do have skills and we do have technologies or modalities that are helpful, that may be helpful for you. But I got to know you, and you know you. Sure.
And that last project you were talking about, what form is that? Is that a book? Is that a... No,
I wanted kind of like the video series. Okay. I'll have some interviews, but then I have a new DVD coming out called EMDR Step by Step, which is the same kind of thing where there's also client demonstrations. So this would be the same kind of thing where we would have all the addiction and the adverse childhood experiences, all of the trauma stuff and the addiction stuff, and then, show how we work with it. So doing client demonstrations. And what I mean by that is there's a guy named Lane Peterson who is in Minnesota. He's a friend. He's one of the people who I think is very well liked, and then and the people who are very fundamentalist towards DBT, not very well liked. But he's taken DBT and tried to make it accessible to everybody. I think we have some data right now that suggests that DBT skills training is what makes the difference. That's what it's showing in the research. I've heard Marsha Lenehan talk about that it is the skills. So to be able to bring the skills to people and not have to charge $125 a session, I think is a real, I think that's an admirable thing to do. So I'm going out to Minnesota to do a 2-day with him. And I think what we'll do is try to put together how you use these, dialectical behavioral skills, which could be called CBT skills with mindfulness or recovery skills, including mindfulness. Could be called anything, sure. But really how you get to how you get in stage 1 of stabilization and safety, how you can use these things without it being such a it's like a comprehensive program, because we have maybe 2 of them here in all of the Philadelphia area, right, where people do quote unquote DBT. And, so the other people think that they can't use these skills, and the skills, they're not Marsha Lenehan's skills, right? I mean, they're CBT skills with mindfulness infused. So I think that to be able to teach that to everybody is a good thing. I'm not one for, saying, okay, I put my name on this and now nobody else can play.
Right. I think on your website, you have a video excerpt from, is it Mission Bomb?
Micah Bomb?
Micah Bomb, pardon. Yeah. And I think he says that. He says, what we're helping people. We're not, superstars. We're not, just incredible or amazing people doing amazing things. We're helping. He brought it down to the ground, to the earth. And I hear that a lot about what you're saying. And I really appreciate that too.
Yeah, just being able to say that when he says something like, God didn't put you on this earth, to heal every type of trauma, that's imaginable,
yeah.
Like have a critical eye. Like there's a lot of things that are helpful, but there is no magic. There's no bullet,
right, exactly.
And so anything that works for this client who's sitting in front of me, what works for this client, let's use it. That means you have to have a real big toolbox. You have to have a lot of things in it. And that's really one of the things that I admire about Dr. Vanderkolk is that he says is, good intentions and warm feelings do not substitute for becoming really good at what you do. And that to me, that is you got to hear that. If these are people's lives in your hands, and I mean that. I'm not saying that you're in charge of them, but I'm saying you have people's lives in your hand, and you better treat that with care.
Yeah. So a lot of the people who are going to be listening to this, are interested in learning about trauma. Can you recommend 2 go-to books for them? Now, obviously, your books are going to be...
But you don't have to say about my books. I know who I'm going to recommend.
Okay.
And I will tell you why. Judy Herman's Trauma and Recovery, because it is the best book in complex... It is the first book and the seminal work in complex trauma, right? For disorders of, extreme stress. Okay, so she's the first person to ever say, hey, guess what? PTSD doesn't fit everybody. There's a whole attachment thing. There's a whole, what about months and years, what about all these things that make PTSD different from complex PTSD? And so she's the first person to really put it in terms of this is a political issue. So her, between her and Vanderkolk did tons of work with borderline personality disorder and complex PTSD. And I think that all of their work is seminal. So her book, everybody should read that. Anybody that's in our field should read it, regardless of the fact if they call themselves trauma informed or not, they should read it. The other book, and I have a lot of trauma books, but I do want to push this one. And I don't know either one of these authors. It's Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. The book is called Attached: The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love. Now, it's for the general public, but all of the research is in it. It's just mentioned, and if you want to go to the research, it's in the back. But I mean, I give it to every client that I see, because I would say every client that I see comes in with insecure attachment or disorganized attachment. Insecure, it's either organized or disorganized, but always insecure when they start with me. That's generally work with Axis 2. So I give everybody that, and I just think it is a fabulous jump off point for people to start understanding the template, their relational template that they started with, and to be able to get a view on. People will say to me, like, I don't want to go look at the past. Why we have to go look at my childhood? I'm not sitting here talking about my childhood. And I say, well, I wouldn't talk about anything, but if it bites you in the ass every day, it's worth a mention, right? And so this is one of those ways, that people can say, oh, I can see that in me. Maybe there is something to this.
Got it. Great. Okay. And those 2 books will definitely be on the show notes page at westcoasttraumaproject.com, and you can hit podcast. Judith Herman's book is obviously talked about all over the place as seminal work.
I'll tell you that Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, will be out this month as well. And, can't recommend that more. He edited his first book, Traumatic Stress, and he hasn't really put anything out since then because he's been doing the research and because he's been applying all the theories, because he's been a clinician and a researcher. He's a good scientist, so he hasn't had time to write. But this is the first book that he has out in, God, forever.
Oh, and that's coming out this month. So
yeah.
We'll definitely be looking forward to that as well. Okay. So we're kind of winding down. Let's hear from you, Linda. Best advice that you've ever had, and that could be either personally, professionally, the best place to contact you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. The best place to contact me is easier. Linda@trauma101.com. Okay. That's the easy way. And the best advice I ever got, I would have to say it's the serenity prayer.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure most people know it, but, like accepting the things you cannot change and the wisdom to know the difference. So to be able to, there are certain things that I can affect, certain things that I can't affect, and those things just need to be accepted. And, once I accept where I am right now, then change happens. It's not, there's no striving. So I think that's probably the best advice.
And I think you opened up a door to yourself and shared so much of your journey that I really appreciate. I just want to say thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much, Guy. It was a pleasure to meet you.